Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're looking at a bunch of headlines from all over the world. A military strike here, a government collapse there, a cool scientific breakthrough over here. On the surface, they seem totally random, right? Like a bunch of disconnected puzzle pieces scattered across a map. But what if they're not? What if they're all part of the same single, really intricate story?
All right, let's just dive right in with our big question for today. What in the world connects a piece of energy infrastructure in Russia, the complete implosion of a Western European government, and a devastating humanitarian crisis in the Middle East? I mean, it really does sound like the setup for a particularly tricky riddle, doesn't it? These events feel like they exist in completely separate universes, governed by different rules, affecting totally different people. But today we're going to grab hold of one single thread that runs through every single one of them, and it does in other stories too, just to show you how they're all woven into the same global fabric.
And that thread? Well, it all starts with a simple idea: the global domino effect. I want you to picture tossing a single stone into a perfectly still pond. You know how it works. The ripples don't just stop where the stone hits. They travel, they expand outwards, and yeah, they get fainter, but they still end up touching every single edge of the shore. In our world, a single action in one country, one decision, one military strike, can trigger those exact same ripples, crossing borders, disrupting economies, and flipping political systems upside down thousands of miles away. So let's trace that first ripple.
Okay, let's get specific. So a Ukrainian drone reportedly hits the Anucha oil pumping station deep inside Russia. Now, on the surface, this is a pretty standard tactical move in a long, brutal war. You target the enemy's economic engine. But this pumping station, it isn't just any old piece of metal. You gotta think of it like a critical heart valve for the southern branch of the Druzhba pipeline. And the irony here is, Druzhba means friendship. This massive Soviet-era pipeline is a primary artery for crude oil flowing directly into Eastern and Central Europe. And guess who's at the end of that pipe? Countries like Hungary and Slovakia. They are hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the conflict, but their entire economies are hooked on that specific flow of Russian oil. So the second that drone hits, alarm bells don't just go off in Moscow. They start screaming in Budapest and Bratislava. The fear of a supply disruption is immediate, it's visceral, and just like that, the ripple has crossed the border. It's a perfect example of how energy infrastructure is basically the nervous system of the continent. You pinch it in one place and you get a massive spasm in another. And we see this exact same ripple effect play out again right here. But this time, the ripple isn't economic, it's moral. The United Nations makes a formal, absolutely devastating declaration. A man-made famine exists in northern Gaza. Now, this is not just another news report. A formal declaration like this carries immense moral and legal weight. It's basically a verdict on a catastrophic failure of humanity. You'd think that weight would be felt most acutely in the region itself, or maybe at the UN headquarters in New York. But no, that moral force, it travels. It crosses continents and it lands, bam, right in the halls of the Dutch parliament. The Netherlands is run by a very delicate coalition government, a partnership of different parties that have to agree on everything to work together. And this single issue, how do we respond to the conflict and the famine? And more specifically, should we impose sanctions on Israel? It becomes the crack that shatters the entire coalition. They just can't agree. So a moral crisis born thousands of miles away has just triggered a political crisis, causing a sophisticated Western government to completely collapse. One event, two very different, very distant consequences. It's wild. So we've seen the immediate ripples, an energy shock, a political implosion. But these waves, whether they're coming from a pipeline or a parliament, they always, and I mean always, create a money trail. In a world that's so uncertain, everyone, from central banks to tech giants to entire nations, is desperately trying to secure their finances and strategically position themselves for whatever comes next. So you know what we're gonna do? Let's follow the money.
And you can see these maneuvers happening at every single level of the global economy. At the very top, you've got the US Federal Reserve, which is basically the world's most influential central bank. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, drops a subtle hint that an interest rate cut might be on the horizon. Why? Well, he's looking at the data and he sees the economy slowing down. So by making it cheaper to borrow money, he's trying to gently press the accelerator to avoid a recession. It's this super delicate, high-stakes balancing act that affects everything from your mortgage rate to the global stock market. At the exact same time, you've got a corporate titan like OpenAI making a massive strategic move. They're opening their first ever office in India.
This isn't just about renting some desks, folks. This is a calculated play in the global war for talent. India has one of the largest, most skilled pools of tech workers on the entire planet, and by planting a flag there, OpenAI is tapping directly into that brainpower to fuel its future in artificial intelligence. Now, here's where things get really fascinating. It's when governments decide they can't just steer the economy from a distance anymore. They need to get their hands dirty and get right in the game. This number, 10%, it might not look like much, but it represents a monumental shift in U.S. industrial policy. The U.S. government is taking a 10% ownership stake in the chipmaker Intel. This is not a bailout. It is a strategic investment, part of the Big CHIPS Act, designed to create what's known as a national champion. The goal is to bring that critical semiconductor manufacturing back to American soil, because right now there's a dangerous reliance on factories in places like Taiwan. So the government is actively picking a winner in a vital industry, a move designed to compete directly with state-backed companies in other countries. It's a major departure from decades of free market thinking.
But these big economic chess moves can sometimes be less like a careful strategic investment and more like a messy schoolyard boxing match. And here's a perfect, totally tangible example of what I mean. The United States, in a classic move of economic protectionism, slaps on a new set of tariffs and really complicated customs rules. This is a high-level government policy. But what's the real-world result? Well, Deutsche Post, the German postal service, basically looks at this and says, you know what? This is way too complicated and way too expensive for us, and their response is to just halt some of its package deliveries to the US. And just like that, a grand trade war between nations has literally reached your mailbox. A big macroeconomic theory has become a microeconomic headache, tangling up global e-commerce and showing just how interconnected and, frankly, fragile the simple act of sending a package has become. So this constant economic pressure, this friction over everything from microchips to mail, it creates this tense and uncertain backdrop for all the moves on the global political chessboard. With the economic ground constantly shifting beneath their feet, leaders all around the world are jostling for position. They're trying to consolidate power, they're making bold plays, and sometimes they're just trying to survive. Let's take a quick spin around that chessboard, and we'll start with a move in the Democratic Republic of Congo that is absolutely seismic. A military prosecutor is seeking the death penalty for a former president, Joseph Kabila, and the charges are just astounding: treason, armed insurrection. Kabila ruled the country for 18 years, a time marked by incredible conflict and all sorts of allegations of corruption. So the crucial question just hangs in the air. Is this a genuine, long overdue pursuit of justice for past crimes? Or is this a calculated, ruthless power play by the current administration to permanently eliminate a powerful political rival? The answer, whatever it is going to set a powerful and potentially very volatile precedent for politics all across Africa.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in the United States, the political temperature is also cranked way up. The FBI, the country's top law enforcement agency, raids the home of John Bolton. Now, Bolton isn't just some random political figure. This guy was the national security advisor to former President Trump. He sat in the most sensitive meetings in the world. And the raid is part of an ongoing investigation into the handling of classified documents, which is a deeply polarizing issue in American politics. This action against such a high-level former official who's known for having a pretty contentious relationship with his old boss, well, it just injects even more fuel into an already fiery political landscape. It really highlights these intense battles being fought over power and state secrets.
But while some political moves are all about internal conflict, others are about external coordination. And this, right here, is a masterstroke of diplomacy. Japan and South Korea, two absolute economic powerhouses and key U.S. allies, are holding a summit. Now, you have to understand, these two nations have a deeply complicated and often painful history, which makes this meeting all the more significant. But the strategic genius is in the timing. They are meeting to align their positions on trade and defense before they're scheduled to meet with the US president. It's a deliberate choice. They're sorting out their own strategy first, so they can approach their larger ally not as two separate countries asking for things, but as a coordinated, united front with a much stronger collective bargaining position. It's a really smart play. And speaking of smart, strategic alliances, check out this move by Australia. They're finalizing a defense treaty with their close neighbor, Papua New Guinea, but the really clever part is buried deep in the details. The treaty includes a special pathway to Australian citizenship for Papua New Guinea nationals who serve in the Australian military. This is soft power at its most brilliant. It's not just about building a port or stationing some troops. It's about building deep, personal, human-level loyalty. It's creating family ties that will bind the two nations together for a generation. In a region where there's intense geopolitical competition for influence, Australia's out here playing chess, while a lot of others are still playing checkers.
But not all political stories are about looking forward. A lot of them are about settling scores from the past. Over in Sri Lanka, another former leader, ex-President Ranil Wickremesinghe, has been arrested. The charge this time is the misuse of state funds. Now, this comes after a period of incredible economic collapse and political turmoil in the country. And in that kind of volatile context, an arrest like this walks a razor's edge. Is it a legitimate act of holding leaders accountable for corruption, which is a necessary step for a nation trying to heal and reform? Or is it a case of the new guard using the legal system to punish the old guard, a form of political retribution that could just keep that cycle of instability going? It's a tough line to walk.
And, sometimes the biggest political headache isn't about grand strategy or old rivalries, but about something much more boring: logistics. The irony here is just it's too rich to ignore. Brazil is all set to host the massive COP30 climate summit, a gathering of the entire world to talk about saving the planet. And they chose to host it in the city of Belém, right at the mouth of the Amazon rainforest. What a symbolic and powerful choice. The problem? The city simply does not have enough hotel rooms to house the tens of thousands of delegates, journalists, and activists who are going to show up. The situation is so dire that the UN is putting on intense pressure, and there are even calls to move the entire event. A conference that was designed to save the Amazon might literally be too big for the Amazon to host. You can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so from logistical tension, we move to the constant, delicate military tension on the Korean Peninsula. And this quote just perfectly captures the dynamic. You read the headlines and it sounds terrifying, right? North Korea accuses the South of firing warning shots. South Korea confirms it, but says it was only after northern troops briefly crossed the border. It sounds like we're on the absolute brink of war. But for seasoned observers, it's understood as more of a performance. It really is a carefully choreographed dance where both sides make these aggressive-looking moves, but they're doing it primarily for their audiences back home. It allows the leaders to look tough and in control, all while being pretty secure in the knowledge that the other side understands the unwritten rules and has no real intention of letting this dance escalate into an actual fight.
Okay, so we've seen conflict, we've followed the money, we've toured the political chessboard, and I know it can feel like a world of constant tension and drama. But that is not the whole story. For every conflict, there is collaboration. For every problem, there are people out there working on a solution. So now, let's zoom out from all that drama and find the incredible stories of progress, cooperation, and just sheer wonder that are also shaping our world. And here is a masterclass in how to solve a modern, borderless problem. Cybercrime, as we all know, does not respect national boundaries. So how on earth do you fight it? Well, look at this recipe for success from Interpol. Operation Serengeti 2.0 resulted in over 1,200 arrests and recovered nearly $100 million from online scams. The key wasn't just old-school police work. The secret sauce was a true public-private partnership. First, private tech firms shared their intelligence on malicious servers and financial fraud. Then, law enforcement agencies across 18 different African nations used that intelligence to coordinate all their actions at the same time. It's a massive success story that proves when you combine technology, trust, and international cooperation, you can take down even the most complex criminal networks.
That same spirit of cooperation can be seen not just on a huge continental scale, but at the most local grassroots level you can imagine: 150 hectares. On its own, that number might not seem huge. It's the size of a new marine protected area in the Philippines. But the real story isn't the size of the park. It's the number that you don't see on this slide: 18. This protected area was established after an 18-year campaign led by the local communities themselves. Can you just imagine the persistence, the meetings, the setbacks, the dedication over almost 2 decades to protect their local ecosystem? It's just powerful proof that the most effective and lasting environmental action often doesn't come from some global summit, but from the ground up, driven by the people who actually call that place home.
And finally, amidst all the news and all the noise, it's so important to just take a moment to look up, look a little closer, and just be amazed. On the vast cosmic scale, we have a rare black moon coming up. That's the term for a second new moon in a single calendar month, and what it means is the night sky is going to be exceptionally dark. A perfect opportunity to turn off our screens, step outside, and get a breathtaking view of the stars. And then, on the microscopic scale, we have human ingenuity at its absolute finest. Scientists have developed a special crystal that can literally absorb oxygen from the air around it and then release it on command. It's essentially mimicking the function of our own lungs. The potential applications for this are just mind-boggling, from generating breathable air for astronauts on Mars to revolutionary new medical devices here on Earth. Just incredible.
So here we are, full circle. We started with a riddle, right? A pipeline, a government, and a famine. And we followed that thread through energy shocks, moral crises, economic maneuvering, political chess moves, and finally, all the way to stories of incredible cooperation and wonder. From a drone strike in Russia to a new marine sanctuary in the Philippines, from a trade war over mail to a lung-mimicking crystal. It really is all connected. We've shown you the threads. The only question now is, which one will you pull on to learn more? We sincerely hope that by connecting these dots for you, we've helped you form a much clearer understanding of the world. Our whole mission is to provide these factual, condensed explainers, totally free from the usual noise and spin. And honestly, we couldn't do it without you, our viewers. To keep connecting the dots with us every single day, please follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. GMT. And if you think a friend or a family member would appreciate this calmer, clearer way of understanding the news, we'd be so grateful if you'd share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll be back tomorrow morning.